All right. Well, let's get this started off. I'll introduce myself. I'm Justin Henderson. I'm the co-founder of H&A Security Solutions. Been doing consulting since I was 13, and now I'm starting to get old. Although Brian's older, right? Just throw that out there, right? 61 certifications. I'm Sam's author and Sam's instructor. Specific to this discussion, I'm author of the SEC 555 SIM with Tactical Analytics. And if you took the previous 455 SIM design and implementation, so most of the work I do is around effectively SOC processes, detection, tooling, engineering, you name it, heavy on the SIM and so on. So that's me. Let me turn it over to my partner, Josh. You introduce yourself.
I'm Josh Saywalt. I'm the other half. I'm the A in H&A Security Solutions. Co-founder, this is Justin. I've been doing IT for, I think if I counted it up, close to 19 years now. So it makes me sound like I'm really old, but it's just in my 30s. Started at a young age. And yeah, I had a lot of experience. Justin and I both worked in healthcare previously, and we started both from more of an administrative systems administration background. But then probably for the last 10 plus years, we have been security focused in everything we do. I don't have as many certs as Justin. I've got 30, and I have no ambitions of ever trying to catch him in any shape or form. It's just, it does not matter at this point in my life to try to attain that. But yeah, really, really excited about this product and being able to solve some issues that we see constantly in customers' environments when we engage with them. All right. Oh, you, Brian.
You're the expert.
Yeah, so Brian Carroll. I'm a SOC manager for a large automotive company, one of the largest privately owned dealership outfits in the country. Been doing IT for 20 years because I'm older, so I get an extra year on. We're gonna keep harping on how old I am. Started out at an MSP doing maintenance on pretty much healthcare, warehouse, industrial, mom and pop shops, fixing computers, and I've only been in security for like 10 years now. So that's my focus. And then, writing cool tools and talking about things like, SOC and alerting and triage and all that fun stuff. So I don't have as many letters as Josh and Justin under my name, and I don't want them because my signature line would get way too long and people make fun of you for that. So
it's fine. At the end of the day, no one actually cares about all that.
I'm gonna get the GSE, but then I'm gonna be done. Like I'm done. Yeah.
I have less than a month to review it. I'm even skeptical if I truly actually want to review it. It's crazy. Anyway, so move past that. Okay, so we're trying to talk about SOC alerting and triaging, and I'm going to assume that if you're listening to this afterward the recording or you're live right now, you probably have had the pleasure or displeasure of sitting behind an alert queue and trying to have yourself and the team go through all. And I feel like it almost like it as a progression. Like you've got ticketing system, you've got the budget, you have a source system, you've got open source tools, you have commercial tools, and your alerts can be funneled to any or all of them, or maybe you have multiple solutions. That would be horrible, but I bet some of you do. And I'm going to guess that every single one of us would say that our process for having analysts go through a queue, our engineers for trying to make that process better, and our escalation paths aren't perfect. I've never sat with an MSSP, managed an MSSP, or implemented one that we were like, this is the best thing ever. So we're going to try to talk about what we kind of see as common themes and issues, how we're trying to address those today. Let's start probably with you, Brian. You've got a lot of MSSP background, plus you're older, right? What are like some of the common strings and threads that prop up inefficiencies or even a lack of capability over and over with how we implement our processes or even tools within the SOC, specifically around obviously triaging?
Yeah, one of the crushing blows that I tend to see, no matter what stack I've used, is just the volume, right? The number of alerts we're getting, the fidelity of those alerts and how easy is it for an analyst to triage that, and can, do they have all the information they need to do that work? Volume today in my current organization is inundating my junior analyst, and we haven't given him all of the information he needs up front to make well-informed decisions. So how do we get better at that, right?
And it's funny you say that, because the volume of alerts that you and your team triage, I would say, is much smaller than pretty much every single one of our other.
That's true, but the context isn't there for that small amount of alerts. For that, the individual isn't as well as versed in those alerts. He didn't write them, right? He's just interpreting what the detection engineer wrote. And if that data is not there to understand why that detection is there, he doesn't know how to triage it. So there's some time there. There's information sharing is big to help you with that alert. Right?
Yeah. Well, and so I think right there that that's that issue right there. Like, let's say 1,000 alerts come in to the SOC. How your tooling treats those 1,000 alerts, in my opinion, is probably one of my number one pet peeves. Example, Josh and I, we still have a decent amount of clients that use like Suricata, Snore, commercial IDS, IPSs. Your next gen firewalls all have these. They generate alerts, and they should. I still love these technologies. Some say they're gone. I still think we need them. But I mean, we've had one client that was 26 different countries. They plugged in or turned on their IDS solutions, and what we were getting about 2 million alerts per 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Now, obviously, that wasn't very well tuned. All of these type of things by default are usually not very well tuned. But our analysts, all of a sudden, well, there's 86,400 seconds for the day. Well, let's break that into 5-minute chunks, times that by 2 million alerts, and okay, release the interns. There's no way in heck we're going to be able to keep it, right? And so we'll have solutions that if I have 10 million alerts a day, and that was even bigger than that. But your analysts are expected to actually go through 10 million alerts, and that seems so silly when often you'll have one alert and it's like 2 machines that are talking about work. In fact, I actually have one of these right now in my environment. We installed additional highly available ADFS servers for Federation, SAML and stuff. And so it's ADFS to ADFS, and there's an alert that's basically saying, oh my gosh, someone's trying to replicate your ADFS data. Except for those 2 machines are supposed to, because they're part of the same ADFS effectively cluster. And so we have thousands of alerts dealing with these 2, but if actually just in an analyst's mind, if we could deal with it nicely, that should actually just be one alert, because it's the same thing over and over between the same machine with the same port, with the same processes, the same user accounts. I should be able to collapse that, treat it as one thing, but still see the historical data like Brian was talking about. I need data that has been occurring for days, hours, minutes, so on. And so that is something that I would actually say is solvable. But okay, I want to bring up Reflex just to show kind of how we've done this. Or Brian, do you want to talk through that, or Josh, do you want to talk through? Either you want to, or I'll do.
You're on a roll, man.
I
can tell you a horror story about.
I'm going to interject when you get started in Reflex and might have you just drive. And
I'll tell you a horror story about bulk dismissing without doing something like this after you're done. But
all right. So this is just a sneak peek of what we're doing with Reflex. I have to be very careful in this. So there's something I'm not going to show you because I need to stay on our tenant. We have multiple clients live in this right now. It supports multi-tenancy. Who cares? Whatever. What I want to show is, you'll see here, this is the name of a rule we have. So we've got our title, which could be whatever you want. And the ones we're looking at there, here's some traditional IDS ones. And so you'll see stuff like, I don't know, ET info, PHP, xdebug, this external IP, this internal IP, 4 occurrences. And if I click on that, you'll notice it's the same IP, the same destination. It's the same destination port, but you'll notice we're rolling up and ignoring the ephemeral port. And I can do that directionally because I have control of how these get rolled up at an extremely granular level. So now I can still see, like, here's when these occurred time-wise. This has been occurring for days. Looks like I'm getting roughly one a day. But I could have, as an analyst, from here, went straight to this alert, view the event. So here's the actual raw data about it. We got the rule in here and all this other information. Any observables get pulled out and extracted for historical information. But my point here is just right off the bat, one thing that I see a lot of SOCs not addressing is, why should my analysts have to treat these as 4 different events when it's really actually the same exact alert and systems or processes? And again, the way we've designed this is you control how the roll occurs. I've selected, in this case, source IP, dest IP, and destination port. I'm not including source port. So some of you are probably scratching your head and be like, Justin, that would work. Because if you're in an IDS, what happens when the rule flips the source and destination? Which actually this rule probably did. Probably destination port 80 going here. Doesn't matter. I can actually control that because in the raw log, there's a thing in here called, see if I can find the field as an example. I'll just search for the values and know this. It is probably outbound.
It's right there, Justin. Networked. Right, you just passed it. Type inbound again. Control F. Type it.
Network direction. So I'm basically keying off, if I see a network direction of inbound, I want to hash certain fields like dest IP, source IP, source port, and roll them up. And so you have 1,000 alerts, you have 1,000,000 alerts. If they're the same thing, all of a sudden, I can just go back to that thing, check it, dismiss it, merge it to a trace, create an automatic rule. We'll talk about that a little bit. Or I could drill into it and do them individually. But again, why would I want to do that? Technically do this. What were you going with, Brian? You were about to mention.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was going to tell a horror story about, not grouping things and how that can kind of come back to bite you. So, well, first and foremost, right? So my shop today, my analysts are using Elastic Signals and Kibana detections queue for doing all their work. And out of the gate, we might get 1,000 events that are all the same, but the fields that we need to correlate those are not available on the queue by default. So the analyst has to dive into the alert, the first one, find the fields that are of interest, add them to the view, right? And then they can go back to the queue and say, okay, which ones, go down the list, down the table and say, okay, which ones all match? Slowly pick each one to bulk dismiss it.
If for some reason you found they needed to see like the payload behind the packet in this, it's currently not here.
Right.
The difference is here it's not there, but I can actually go in, select the data source, or we call it the input, and I can automatically add it as a tag, which is filterable, or I can add it over here in these gray boxes, which is a observable. It's tracked historically.
Right.
Plus, at the end of the day, you still could drill in without going back.
Yep. And the ultimate problem with this is that all that extra work is going to make the analyst tired and just sick of triaging alerts. So I earlier on in my career made the mistake of, all right, these are all the same alert. They look like they're the same. Let me just bulk select them and dismiss them all. Well, in that local user account created alert, I actually dismissed a malicious event, but didn't know about it till 90 days later when I had a server go boom. So, all that noise, if you're not handling that noise up front, you're taking your analyst's ability to look for the key event away from them. They got to dig through all that. They got to find that needle. So.
Yeah, I mean, alert fatigue is real, 100%. I mean, I don't know how many clients we walk into, and even when we're helping them set up something like an IDS or something, if they're not actively tuning it, or we're helping them tune it right out of the gate, there's just no way that they can ever keep up.
I love it. So you said the word up, and that makes me think we probably have 3 active clients right now that are using other systems like the Hive or something. And again, not picking on any of them, but there have been times that they have gotten a lot more alerts all of a sudden. 10,000, 100,000, like with all the SolarWinds. What was the more recent one?
Log4j.
Boom, that was it. Log4j, like new alert came in, system on, they added it, and And the problem was their alert queue grew to like 100,000, which whatever, it's 100,000. But some of the systems they were using, you couldn't say search for log4j, highlight all, dismiss, or add to case, and so what they had to do is 100 at a time. But keep in mind, they're bringing in more than 100 per minute. And so either an analyst has to sit there and select 100, dismiss, select 100, dismiss. And so it actually became to actually keep up their queue. So they had to start figuring out how to dive into the backend database or indices, depending on where the data is, and basically hack away at it, trying to get rid of the. And that's just kind of silly that your system that you're using for these investigations can't support a way to handle these on minutes. Well, one, you should be able to do a select all, and yeah, could you shoot yourself in the foot doing that? Yeah, I mean, Brian did. Granted, it was a lack of context, but I think I'm the kind of person I believe you reserve the right to be able to shoot yourself in the foot. Don't take it away because you can. Still need to be able to do it. But there's a different problem with this example too. Not only do I need to be able to handle that large volume, but even if I can handle that large volume, like select all log4js and dismiss or merge to case, as soon as I did that, 1 minute later, what happened? 100 new log4js came in. So again, does an analyst just sit there and keep select all, merge to case, select all, dismiss? How are we addressing that today? Either one.
So I try to instill, I try to instill that they should tune first, dismiss second. But yeah, there's not always that opportunity, right? You want to get rid of the noise so you can start to look for the more critical alerts in your queue. So you kind of put that tuning off to the side, and then eventually at the end of the day comes and you haven't done the tuning, and your queue's still absolutely trashed.
I also find, just to interject, that sometimes the analysts that are the ones that are beating their head against the wall with all the alerts coming in over and over again, sometimes don't actually have the access or the capabilities or the knowledge to go tune the rule to out the gate. Yeah. So there sometimes that's just I escalated and I'm waiting on X admin to do this for me, but yet that entire time I'm just sitting there, dismiss,
or merge the case. It's like you don't like. How many times have we been like, hey, client, is this actually bad? It looks like it is, but ultimately now we're waiting on you to make a decision. But it might be, no kidding, it might be a month before they answer. It should be like that day. Let's be realistic. Everybody's busy. The reason that they hire MSSPs, or whether you're an internal, external SOC, you might be waiting on a business unit. And so what does that do to your analyst queue? It's got all these things that are cluttering it up that you're waiting on a decision. So what did we put in Reflex to address that? That you still could try to replicate in other tools. How are we addressing?
We've created kind of an automation, right? We've created these things called event rules. I can see if I can share one. Yeah. While I'm pulling up my instance. Or you can be like my organization, doesn't tell Justin's team at all if something's good. We just ignore it. All right, so
fake record.
So to Justin's point, in Reflex, we're using what we call event rules, and we've created this language called RQL. It's the Reflex query language, to automatically look at events as they come in and take those observables that the analyst has looked at and said, okay, it has to meet these conditions. And if it does, we're going to take action on it automatically so that the analyst doesn't have to do it again, right? So I've triaged this alert, this user added to local admin alert. I know that, Brian's supposed to be a local admin on BFG 4000. I'm going to create an event rule, write my query so that these two criteria have to match, right? I'm going to test it. We know it matched the event. And then I can come here and say, I'm going to merge it into a case, or I'm going to dismiss it because I don't really care about it. I'm going to give a reason why I want to dismiss it. I can tag it to add additional context, like reviewed or approved activity. And if it was something that really needs attention and needs to boil to the top, I can upgrade the severity or downgrade the severity and still leave it open. So if I have an analyst that looks at just the critical queue, I can shuffle it between work queues by changing the severity on it, or adding a tag, or that kind of stuff. So we've added this event rule technology. Take the clustered alerts that you've already clustered up into one card, and then start to just automatically get them out of your view because you've already looked at it once.
Yeah. Or you're currently in mid investigation, but you don't want other analysts to see them because it's filling the queue. You've got this one, right? Let them worry about everything else.
Hey, Brian, could you bring that back up? Because this kind of goes back to the point I was making earlier when we were just talking about, analysts sometimes don't always have the expertise to go into system A, B, or C and tune the alert. And I think a problem that we're solving with these event rules is that it provides immediate relief to the analyst to be able to create an event rule that will perform a repetitive action for them until the proper tuning can be done. And it also simplifies it from a training perspective for my analyst in the SOC, is that they don't have to understand how to tune the IDS and the firewall and all these different systems that are sending alerts in. They just need to understand and just learn this specific language, because the RQL, which is the query language that we have adopted for this, allows you, because currently, Brian, you're just doing off observables, but there's the view source event button on the bottom right of this specifically, where you can go back to actually viewing the raw log, and anything that is shown. And again, there's not a lot here in this specific one, but back to like that event Justin had where it was the entire log coming from an IDS. I can actually use like raw log and specify any field or criteria to say if this is true or if it's a regular expression, etc. Exclude.
And you can do some really advanced things you can't do potentially at the source alert device, like lowercase, base64 decode, geo lookup, and so now I might be able to auto merge to case or auto dismiss based on criteria you can't even do at the source. But realistically, let's go back to what Josh was really pointing out. Let's say you had to tune an IDS alert. You're going into Suricata or Snort and you're modifying an alert. How long does that take you to modify one rule? And be honest, I'm really good at doing that, but it takes me a while to get connected to the right device, the right sensor, or the master's device, and then I got to go hunt down the file. Sometimes I put syntax errors, and yeah, they're silly, but it takes me, I don't know, it might take me 10 minutes to put a rule in. And if it's like a lot of systems, if you put a syntax error in, sometimes it doesn't warn you. And so now you've tuned the rule, but things aren't firing at all. So you have to add testing to changing those rules because they're kind of dangerous. And so it takes, I don't know, 10 minutes maybe to update one rule. And yes, I totally get if you're in there all day, you'll go faster and faster. But this only takes me somewhere between 30 seconds and 5 minutes, to the point where I've trained our staff, if the alert volume is less than 1,000 a day, I don't even care if you tune the source device anymore. If it's 100,000, I just don't want the system to get the performance penalty. But I mean, Brian, we've already tested these, at least in our instance, where we've been able to handle close to 1 million events per second. So granted, I've got some pretty beefy hardware. Oh.
Yeah, you're cheating the system. Yeah,
cheating the system. But it's automation. And then it's actually kind of interesting because when you solve one problem, it's almost like you creating another one. Because one thing I see over and over again is, okay, your internal SOC, external SOC, alert gets generated. It's crisp.exe. Is crisp.exe good or bad? Could it have been benign but then renamed? What's the hash? What's the imp hash? And so all of a sudden you find all this know thyself data that you kind of expect your analysts to accumulate and remember until they die or quit. Because they're not allowed to leave, right? It's die or quit. That hurts us. How do you scale head knowledge? Oh, we cross-train. Yeah, and how well does that work for you? You should cross-train. Please cross-train. Well, let's be honest, it's hard, and it still doesn't scale out that well. Well, what I would really like to do is take some of that head knowledge and dump it into the system so that the system can reference it. I'm not talking playbooks. If you've ever heard of playbooks, automation around that clearly would be super sophisticated. And we're actually probably a couple months from having playbook support in ReflexSOAR. What I'm talking about right now is something that we initially solved because It just made, once we had event rules where we can automatically dismiss and merge cases for triage, we're really talking more triage right now. It actually made sense to be able to auto reference what we call intel lists. Meaning, all right, who's a sensitive user? I don't know. These 100 accounts, these are our 1,000 service accounts. Is that a reg expression? Because quite frankly, that doesn't actually work, because before you had a naming convention, you had service accounts. And I bet you didn't rename those service accounts. And so now you can go in and you can create lists. And again, if you're in Jira, if you're in other solutions, other source solutions, these are things you need to consider doing. Take some of this knowledge that helps your analysts out and dump them somewhere, almost like a little mini CMDB, and then auto reference them. So, Brian, you want to just kind of walk through an example and then how you might query that over in like RQL land?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I've pre-created this list. We call it domain admins, and we pick what type of list it is. If it's a value, if we're using regular expressions, if it's from a CSV file, and then we can check the data type. Is it an IP, domain? Is it a specific user? In this case, it would be users, and we add the users that we want that are domain admins to this list of values. Now, leveraging event rules, we can we can quickly query. So we'll say on every alert that comes in, if the data type of these observables user and they're in the list domain admins, I want to tag it with boom, right? Or domain admin or whatever. And so now the analyst doesn't even have to update the event query anymore, or the RQL or the event rule. They just need to go back to the list manager and update the list. They just change the value here. So they don't need to be well-versed in RQL anymore. They just add another value.
Right? And technically, you're in the queue and you see, oh, that user should have been in a certain list. Click add to list. Boom.
Pick the list, add the observable, right? So you never leave the queue page. The analyst doesn't have to go to 5 different tools. What today, like our feedback loop in my SOC is like somebody has to go to another web page and type the value in and hit submit, and then it puts it into Logstash and Memcache and all these different systems. You don't have to worry about doing that. You're staying in the analyst system and not going outside.
And again, now the problem is thinking of the use cases, because like domain admins, privileged users, service accounts, okay, that's weak sauce, right? Well, what if you were to pull in and say, well, I've got all the CVEs mapped to all the hosts, so these are the hosts that are vulnerable to these CVEs. Where did you get that? Well, your vulnerability scanners, right? And so, or your EDR often has that as well. So now I can have a list of hosts and the CVEs that are vulnerable against. And when an alert comes in, a lot of alert systems have CVE numbers attached to them. Well, there you go. Okay, do I increase the severity? Do I auto merge it into a case that says, hey, deal with this right now because I saw an attack and you're vulnerable to it? And so you start tying these things together. And we've got a huge roadmap of things that we're still trying to also add, like changing the severity is great, but if we have a powerful language like RQL, we can custom support risk scores. Think severity times 1,000. So low is 1,000, medium's 2,000. But now I could say, but if it's in the privileged user list, add 500 points. And so now you could try to prioritize things differently based on your organization's processes, because a system supports automatically bringing things to your attention. Or maybe it does a Teams or Slack webhook that says, hey, get in the queue, click this link. You need to look at this. Right?
I just want to stress that we have this built in ReflexSOAR, but you can do this through other means. If you're good with Python or PowerShell, like that's how this project started. Like Justin and I 2.5 years ago were like, let's just send alerts from Elastic to the Hive, because it didn't exist natively without ElastAlert. And I was using the native signals inside Elastic, and I was like, I need to write a tool. I wrote a tool to save myself time, but we're just trying to do it for you. So
yeah. I mean, I don't know how many of you are using like Jupyter notebooks or just Python PowerShell scripts or Go, Rust. I don't care what the language is, but I think a big problem we sometimes get ourselves into is we don't stop, take a step back, identify the problems or key inefficiencies and then try to solve them. Realistically, if you've heard SOAR, you're paying for SOAR, that's what it helps solve, but it's a little bit of a problem with that. You can't solve a problem if you don't know it exists. If you have a $500,000 SOAR, because I've seen the prices, doesn't do you any good if you haven't identified use cases and implemented them. So sometimes you also need folks who know the use cases, and not to toot our own horns, but we've been doing this for a long time in many different environments. So we've even seen the different approaches. So what we're attempting to do with ReflexSOAR, and again, you don't need ReflexSOAR, you can do this with other tools, but we're trying to take the mindset of security-focused, experienced individuals, the folks on this call, or plus a few other team members, and ideally even you, because you're in the community. We give back, everybody wins type of thing, right? And we are trying to create a solution for alert triage, investigations, and playbooks, but designed from the ground up from folks who know, well, here are the use cases that you're not thinking of. Because what we're going to start doing is we're going to build in things like, think of it almost as like check repos, that we have all these different use cases, or even detection rules or intel lists like feeds, and or hey, you have Active Directory Azure or on-prem LDAP. If you'll let us point at it, we'll pull in your sensitive groups. We'll pull in those intel lists, and you just have to say enable and give us credentials, and we'll try not to steal them, right? No, I'm just kidding. We won't do that, right? But the use cases that you sometimes don't think of will kind of be pre-built into them, where you just have to flip that switch to turn it on, and then hopefully we'll do like training videos and stuff to help. But again, if you're not using the tool, that's fine, because there's nothing revolutionary we're doing. We're just trying to put it all in one spot for you. So if you want to reverse engineer what we're doing and apply it to other tools, can you connect to APIs from other alert databases to aid in triage? So we are growing that out. So like right now, we can clearly reach into Elasticsearch, OpenSearch. It would be relatively easy to support SQL, MySQL, Maria. We're probably going to build in Microsoft ATP Defender. EDR sources, you've already got what, Sentinel-1 in there or something?
I've got Sentinel-1 coming in, but through other means. But we're going to build a plugin for that and some other thing.
Yeah, so like Ernest, you're on the right mindset. That again, yeah, yes. We're even talking about doing something silly like making it where you can put what we call a reflex agent, which is really how we reach over to those APIs or endpoints to bring in alerts. But to do it also for gathering intel lists, running playbooks, or even if you had it like on all of your army of Windows boxes, that you could do things like host isolation and stuff without paying for like an EDR solution and stuff like that. Yeah, and so ReflexSOAR, we are going live May 1st, I think is our I think we're pretty confident we're going to go live May 1st at this point. It's going to be open source. Again, please keep in mind if you're watching this after the fact or live right now, while yes, we're trying to help share this tool because we're proud of it, we're trying to push the processes and ideas behind why we created it, because they should apply to everything. ReflexSOAR will be 100% open source. You will never pay for, and this is being recorded. And granted, if I lie later, you can stab me. Please don't. That hurts. But we are intending to never charge for any features. So there will never be an enterprise edition versus an open source. That is our current mindset, and we will probably stick to it. What we do offer is enterprise support contracts, which is kind of like a little bit of an MSSP service built in. We technically have our own MSSP, so if you need that, we do that regardless of Reflex. But what we'll do is we'll actually license you on our SaaS platform or on premise, and we'll set it up and we'll coach you, and we'll actually continue to walk through with it the entire time you're using it as a supported commercial contract. The reason I'm wording it that way is there are so many organizations that will not use open source. So if you can use open source and you want to go at your own, just keep in mind you better know the use cases, and there's a decent amount of moving parts to get it working, but it's free and we hope we can help you. If you're already low on staff, which if you're listening to this, you already know the struggles of the SOC, which is why we have it as a commercial offering where we basically come up beside you And technically, we even customize the product as we continue to grow it. I feel like I'm in a hardcore sales pitch mode, but that's because I'm excited and I like it. So let me step back.
So let's bring it back a bit. Yeah.
Let's get back to some of the problems that we hope you solve with any tooling. Right? We've kind of showcased the event queue multiple times. Is there anything else on the event queue, like the triage steps that we've identified as core problems?
Just since I'm basically just having you drive, being too lazy to share it myself. One of the things was the IOCs components, and just thought we could talk through that. So in any of the events that you have, when you go to actually view the event by hitting the magnifying glass on the right-hand side of any of the events, up at the top, you have the option to click on the overview, which will again show you all the observables. And kind of what Brian was mentioning earlier, his process with his team today is they have to go to a separate system to whitelist or add things to an Intel list, etc. The other thing that we're trying to solve is also being able to say, well, if my analysts are actually taking the time to do the research to be like, well, what is this external IP? Is it good or bad? Like if I run virus total against it, if I go out and I do Google search against it and do all those things, which you can technically do by clicking the specific, observable and run that, should I actually require my analysts coming behind them do the exact same amount of work and research on that same IP, external IP, the same domain, etc.? And so what we're looking to do is actually in the event itself, allow your analysts to begin to say, yes, this is good. No, this is bad. Yes, this is good. And keep a historical record of those specific IOCs in your environment so that you can actually say, hey, this was safe today, but maybe a week later it's not safe. Or, hey, this is an IOC and it's validated, because there again, it gives us another hook into what we're doing to say, well, if it's an IOC, add this tag for this event rule, or add this additional context, raise the severity level, because at least it's been reported X number of times as it's come through. And I think that really just adds value. And again, like Brian was communicating, we're really trying to make it where your analysts don't have to leave the screen. I want them a single pane of glass. And I know that's like kind of cliche to say because everyone's trying to give you that single pane of glass with their interface, but that's really where less.
You don't want a single pane of task. You just want more efficiently not having to leave unless you really need to. Yeah.
I find when I'm on alert duty for the week and I have to leave the system that I'm currently in, I get distracted by finding problems in the other system. I'm like, oh, that's broken. Let me go fix that. And then I forget my alert triage duties for the day. And 5 o'clock rolls around and there's 100 alerts that I haven't finished yet. Right?
Yeah. And I guess, so past alert triage, I just wanted to show this. I created a test case. I had to be careful because, again, if I click on the case page, you'll see other client information. And I can't show that. So this one, I just created a manual test case, but it's the kind of stuff you would need. Markdown for descriptions. I can assign things. I can reassign things. Your observables. If I merged events, would auto get pulled here, still with their flags if it's IOC spotted and stuff like that. I could see all.
Can I stop you for 1 second while you're still on the observables tab? So one of the biggest pain points that I've had in other tools as well is having to add custom observables. Right.
You want to show where you're going with? Because I think I know what you're talking about.
Sure.
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah. So what
you showcase cases because you actually have test data that you won't accidentally share live production data.
I just did, but whatever. This is my production data, so it's fine.
Okay.
So normally, like, the analyst is going to come through and they're going to extract and grok up custom observables out of the event, and they need to add it somehow, right? And in other platforms, they don't even let you do that. Or I've had to go to a custom system to add it. But what we've done is we've added the ability to do bulk observables, right? And it's going to automatically contextualize these for you. So if I was to do 1.1.1 and google.com and Brian at ReflexSOAR.com, you can paste all these in on the fly, and it's automatically going to pull the data type for you. If it was seen in any of the threat intel stuff, these would be flagged, right? And then I just hit save, and they're going to pop up now as observables on this case, even if they weren't on the original event that was merged into it. So it takes the time for the analyst to go and manually enter each one and go to other systems, and just shortens it significantly. And because we have a full API, you can have your other systems pull from our observable data as well. So that's kind of what I was getting at there, Justin. That's
so I was thinking you were going to show the auto magic.
We do some auto data typing on observables. That's on ingest.
Yeah. Didn't you have that list that you could basically just copy and paste them all into one thing, and it would just?
Yeah, that's what this is. So Google.com,
yeah.
right? It's going to automatically look using regular expressions if it's a host or a URL or whatever. It might misclassify sometimes, but you get the idea.
At least it will attempt the auto so that you don't have to manually do all the things. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Going forward, these, if we had events merged into this case, all the events would show up here, the same experience that you would have on the queue page here, so that the analyst's experience never changes. Going back into here, tasks, right? When I create a case, how should I triage all the alerts and events that are attached to that? This is the knowledge sharing piece that I mentioned at the top of the session, where a junior analyst might not have all the desired steps to triage or take care of these items. So we allow you to apply case templates. This is a phishing case. These are the 5 steps you need to do every time it's a phishing email. Fetch the original email, notify the user, quarantine it, postmortem, add the observables, right? They're going to follow these and add their notes for each one along the way. So when I come back as a SOC manager, I can go, okay, what did my analyst do today? This is how he fetched the email. Maybe there's a step here that tells him exactly how to do it. We can have conversations back and forth, comment on the case. And over time, we build this history timeline of the case as well. Here's when I first opened it. I updated the description. I added some observables. So you have the entire case history from soup to nuts, from open to close, and everything that happened on it, because your auditors are going to love that, right? My auditors ask me all the time, hey, how do you know you did something right in the case history? And then we can link cases together just for housekeeping purposes if they're related in any way. But it's very simplified case management. I have grandiose plans for this, but it's the starting. Justin, what were you trying to get to when you were jumping to cases? Did I miss anything?
No, that's it. I just want to give because you've got to have something to have your notes and to actually work. Like in our fashion, the event queue is kind of the triage, and then the case is, I think it merits an investigation, like a full investigation, effectively. Which is kind of interesting because one thing I've noticed that we do is historically in case management systems, we would triage almost everything into a case. Like if you wanted to say, oh, here's an alert, what do I do with it? You would actually Justin logs in, he selects the alerts that he wants to triage. How does he triage them? He adds them to a case. And then it's like mandated note taking and all this extra red tape. And to be honest, for me, that always felt really kludgy. I'm not going to name other systems, but I feel like a lot of them do that. Where what we've kind of done is if you're investigating the event queue, I'll share my screen here. If I'm in the queue, and I saw this one earlier in here, it was it's already schooled past, but let's just say ET user agent, Microsoft device, metadata retrieval client. And I look at this, there's a really basic user agent, and it'll actually show up here. Boom. I'm sorry, but the fact that I see a user agent to me doesn't really merit that I'm totally been hacked and compromised. And so I don't think these specifically probably warrant a full-fledged 15-minute investigation. I might look up to see what the rule is actually doing, which I've got it up here top. And it's literally just looking for a user agent, HTTP user agent, of this. And quite frankly, I don't care. And so what I might say from an analyst perspective is, well, let's grab all of these and, I could, I didn't update your thing. I can dismiss these all, select no action required. Maybe next time it's bad, but unlikely. That's not what I would actually put. What I probably would put is false positive. I clicked off it. False positive. Probably not the best rule. Consider tuning or just disabling because it's really not that good of a rule. I would waste a lot of cycles of analysts looking at the same thing over and over again when the fidelity of it likely finding something bad, it's just not really there. Where before I would have had to merge this into a case and work my notes and my reasoning in the case. So I would probably say, I don't know, Brian, Josh, what do you think? 90% of the time we effectively triage and we're done, maybe 95% of the time. And then 5% of the time when you're like, I'm not sure on this one. I need to go back to the SIEM or this data source, and I actually need to look at multiple things, or I need to use event rules or enrichment and stuff to gather more information before making a decision. Those are what we treat as cases.
Correct.
But before, if you're forced to case everything, that's a lot of extra clicks. Yeah, everything is timed. Everything is historically audited when you do this. So the question is, could we audit a report on these dismissed event reasons? Yeah, we actually do that right now for our production clients. We have a report we send them every month, and it says, here's your category of the dismissals, but here's the actual reasoning behind them. And we roll them up into, so it's not, 10,000 comments long. But again, like that example I just showed you, I would have event ruled that. So the dismiss reason would have been the same for that ET user agent specific rule. So if it had 10,000 alerts, you would see 10,000 dismisses, false positive. Here's the reason why. Yeah.
And we are looking to build in like future state, not to make Brian freak out as developing it. We have that
say the same
dashboard that was shared just now that kind of just gives an overview of what's happening in the environment for managers, etc. But we are going to build in reporting that is going to be very specific as to say, like, how long does it take me to actually review an alert that comes into my environment? Is that alert that's coming into my environment being touched by like an event rule, or is my analyst actually working it? How long does it take for me to actually like make a decision or close the case? What does that time gap look like?
And to clarify that, when Josh says reporting, we actually have all of that. All the data's there. And under the hood, what we'll probably do for the open source distributions is it will be deployed on top of OpenSearch, which was the fork from Elastic. So that means anything you're used to doing in OpenSearch dashboards or Kibana, we would already have pre-built anyway, because that's what we're doing today. But tomorrow we'll let you build custom reports within the Reflex interface, because this will really make Brian nervous.
I'm already over here sweating, so I was kidding.
Our ultimate goal here is we're actually planning on doing this even as a full-fledged, we'll just say a SIEM investigation replacement. So if you're familiar with Elastic Stack or OpenSearch, think of Kibana. We want to get rid of that entirely. We want to replace the interface because it's a fine interface. It's actually super powerful. I like it. But I want it to be extremely custom built for the analyst experience. And unfortunately, has a very broad use case. So there's just some things that it's missing. Not bad at all. So Brian here.
Yeah. No, that's the grand plans, right? We talked about that. I want to rewind maybe 20 seconds to what Josh was talking about with, everything timestamped and how long does it take? And, if your SIEM doesn't give you that data today, you need to figure out a way to get it, right? I've run into scenarios where, the junior analyst is just punting everything to the senior engineer because they don't know what to do. So I look at it from a SOC manager perspective. Why is my engineer doing all the work in the SIEM or in the alert triage? Where is my gap, right? Is it taking somebody 20 to 30 minutes to triage an alert that should take a minute? Why? Were they not informed? Was there some data piece missing? So all that extra metadata is helpful for triaging the health of your SOC, right? Not just helping you triage it up front, but training your team. Hey, this guy takes forever. Let's get him some training. This guy kicks it up to senior engineering all the time. Let's get him some training. Let's add additional data to the system because they don't have it up front. So that those metadata helps. And we're trying to add as much metadata as we possibly can. Time to closure, time to open, time to first interaction. Who escalated it the most, like that stuff. So
and Brian, like one thing we already have the data for, so it's It's something Josh and I are doing on the back end, but something we might want to bring under the roof is what source is generating the alerts. Is it your IDS? Is it your EDR? Is it Microsoft ATP? Is it your SIEM alerting interface? And so not only do you know the source, you know how long it takes to triage per source. Everything he just said, you could compound it down here. And typically those detections often have tags or other metadata, so you could further subset it down by category. Like, I'll go back to IDS again, just because I think people easily understand that. Like, there's informational alerts, which really aren't alerts, right? There's scanning. Okay, you can't do anything about it. You're going to get scanned all day long. Unless it's internal, that means something different. But from the internet, normal. Exploits, and you go down the list, right? So now I can make an informed decision on my analyst is just getting destroyed because they don't know how to handle certain categories. Or what we see a lot of is ET info, like informational alerts, shouldn't have been in your SOC queue. You should still have them for correlation and investigations, but they're not really truly alerts. So bringing them in confuses your analyst, you're saying it's an alert, but it's not really an alert. Okay. So you can start to make some of that decision making, and all of that is drilled down by category, time, analyst. Like, all the data is for sure there today. And to be honest, we built the reports in less than a day using like Kibana OpenSearch dashboards, but we'll build in that custom reporting interface so that you can do it outside of even that as well.
One of the things I really want to build into this, and it's an important metric, is it's not just the training portion. It is, are we just falling behind at all? Right? Day over day, is our time to triage going up, 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 up? Well, maybe I don't have enough people, right? So there's other ways.
You don't have enough event rules.
I don't have enough H&A apparently. So that's
well,
not. No, they do a great job. I'm kidding, but
we drive him nuts because when he first created event rules, he's like, yeah, this is cool. I just don't know how much you use it. And we're like 200 and some event rules later, and he's like, what are you doing? He's like, what do you mean, what are we doing? This is like the most powerful, coolest thing yet. And then actually, I can quantify that. We actually should do an actual mathematical number. I know for a fact that the event rule system itself, the triage automation, has saved us at least 1 FTE. I would actually go as far as to say, compared to how we used to do this, we've probably saved 1.5 FTEs because we were going to hire 2 more people this year. We didn't hire the first one, and the one slated for later in this year, I seriously doubt we're going to need them. We might just to be safe because we need to take care of our clients, but it has been so wildly efficient to auto-merge the cases or auto-dismiss based on RQL, Reflex Query Language, by the way. We probably should have called that out. But again, same thing is true regardless of the tooling you're using, because I don't know if you noticed this, but if you're using Splunk, if you're using a different case management tool, even something like Jira, almost all of those have APIs. Meaning you can PowerShell, Python, pick your language of choice, reach in there, grab the data, come up with some logic against it, and then take action against it. The difference is a lot of you don't like programming, which is why we're doing this. So, yeah. Well, we got 4 minutes left. Any other core deficiency or challenge we experience on a SOC, regardless of Reflex or whatever, that's just something that, as we've learned over time and experienced, that there's a different way of going about it.
So you're probably a good source of knowledge on this, but that, do we have all the data we need? Right? Do I have the required data? Am I seeing the alerts that I should? Right? That is a big challenge for me today. I look at because I've gone through the exercise and done the MITRE map. I don't have the coverage I need. What do I need to do to get there? Right? So
yep.
How can open source tools help us with that?
Can I actually
reword that? We have plans for our tool to do that, but yeah, Justin, go ahead.
Let me reword that question a little bit. This is for all of you listening. How many data sources do you currently bring in alerts from? As alerts, not logs. Like if I'm bringing in Sophos and Trend Micro and Carbon Black and all these tools into my SIEM, but I'm not actually letting it go to an alert queue, that's just a raw data source. It's a log. Honestly, think about this in your head right now. can you quantify numerically how many alert data sources you have today, meaning you're investigating those data sources? For most clients, I'm going to bet the answer is 2 to 3. My SIEM alert engine, my EDR, and then you'll say things like your firewall, but to be honest, you're not taking IPS events and app control block. You're not taking certain things and moving them into your queue for investigation. You just have the data, so that doesn't count as 3. Sorry. You have a data source, but not an alert data source. And so I'm going to challenge you today, for all of you listening, there's a lot of things out there you should be monitoring that you already own, but you're not bringing it into the SOC. Like Office 365 natively has alerts. Azure AD has, oh my goodness, like risky users, which I got flagged as one this morning for whatever reason. But like you got risky users, risky sign-ons. If you have Microsoft Defender, and I'm sorry, AWS has built-in alerts. There's Google, there's Oracle, there's like, think of your cloud data sources, your firewalls. Yes, I'm not going to look at every single block, but if my IPS blocks something, sometimes you should care. So I should be bringing that into the queue. Your antivirus, I know that we're all about next-gen AV and all that, but I don't know how many times a plain old signature-based antivirus system said, clearly you have ransomware in your environment. And the clients are just like, yeah, but it's just old school technology. Who cares? When we're like, hey, we've got some cool rules that we put in your SIEM, but this thing found it for you. I don't care. Does it really matter if it's new and shiny and fancy, if it still technically actually generates alerts that are meaningful? Again, the problem is sometimes those logs lack substance, which is why we need to augment them with other things and use enrichment. That's a separate conversation. But if you don't have at least 5 alert sources, I don't want to say shame on you, but
shame on you.
Shame. I mean, honestly, you have every organization, even if they're like, we have a client that is, our smallest client right now is probably about 200 assets. That organization has way more than 5 alert sources. Now, granted, we're not looking at all of them, but they have more alert sources than some of our much, 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 much larger organizations. That's not right. So you need to bring them into your SOC. Some things shouldn't, some things should. Got to find that right balance. So we are 1 minute over. I really hope this has been informative for everybody. Right. I don't care whether you're using ReflexSOAR or not. I mean, honestly, we're releasing it for the community. I hope it helps tons of folks out. It's free for those who want to go the journey their own. If you want to walk down the yellow brick road and hopefully find the man behind the curtains, that's going to be for you. Roughly May 1, 2022 is what we're aiming for. There's a lot of bells and whistles. You have to have the experience to know the use cases. You got to know what you're doing, regardless of the tooling. This has nothing to do with that. So if you need help with that, let us know. H&A Security Solutions, that's one of the things we specialize with. We're going to try to do more live streams, more YouTube videos, more free stuff. So stay tuned. If you need help, have any questions, email me, Justin at hasecurity-solutions.com. Josh is Josh at hasecurity-solutions.com. Brian, technically, who cares? We just make him do all the things.
They'll funnel things to me.
Yeah, if you have a question, we'll grunt work and punt it over to Brian. It's all good. No.
We'll figure it out. Brian, escalation.
Oh, yeah. All right. So I'll post this here shortly once it's done. Thanks all. And again, feel free to continue this conversation, email or offline via social media. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. And stay tuned.
Bye, everyone.